Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we make custom shaped banks. When I first started CNCKing.com, my initial goal was to make a whole bunch of different shapes as banks. But after doing some research, I decided the first thing to do to learn all that's involved with that, which has taken months to figure out, was to start with the letters from the alphabet. Now, letters from the alphabet might sound like something very simple, but it's actually quite complicated to do with a CNC router properly. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of curves inside and outside. There's a lot of inner corners. There's a lot of issues in it that can cause a lot of problems during production. And that's one of the headaches that I had when I first started this company, was that when I had my old CNC router, I was doing it, I had nothing but problems because of all the challenges. One, using a hardwood. So red oak is a very, very hard hardwood. That's why it's called hardwood. But two, having a router that's rigid and strong enough to actually router everything perfectly inside of it. Now with the router behind me here, I can actually router out a bank and have it almost ready for shipping almost immediately. There might be a couple of touch-ups here and there to do a little bit of sanding, but overall, I have very little to do afterwards other than the finishing and other options that we do for the banks. That was one thing that took many months to figure out and sort out, but you can't just use a machine like this off any design. You also have to optimize the design to match the machine. So that means feeds and speeds and a whole bunch of other stuff that I won't really get into right now. So after I got all of that stuff sorted out, then I decided, okay, well now let's go into shapes. And that's something that I don't see too much of, and that's something that's really interesting to me. My main company is CNCKing.com. We do custom fabrication day in and day out. And every project we do is completely different, it's unique and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to bring that to the banking business. And what I mean by that is, if you have a kid who loves unicorns, I want to make a unicorn bank. If they love, helicopters, I want to make a helicopter bank. I want to offer that ultimate flexibility, but still have it custom. And that's kind of cool. And that's what I would like to have when I was a kid. When I was growing up, I actually had a loon bank, or as a duck, I'm not sure which it was. It's been a long time. But I really enjoyed that bank because of what it was. And now that I'm able to produce literally any shaped bank, I could think back to myself, hey, if I was really into, monster trucks back then, having a monster truck bank would be cool. So that's something I want to get into. So again, before we go into the show and tell, first thing I want to do is get out of the way is the acrylic options on the front windows. That's something that also has evolved a lot throughout the months. It got a lot of testing, a lot of fabricating, a lot of headaches, all that kind of stuff that you have to deal with. I just dropped one of these, and that kind of works out. Acrylic is a very strong material. So this here is a light green. I'll put it over my shirt so you can sort of see the shade. And I've got it engraved with CNCKing.com, but that, of course, be on a bank, and it would be your child's name or whatever other message that you want. And I also want to show you what the reverse looks like. So you can see here, it's almost identical for a lot of these lighter colors. Next one is blue. So you can see over my shirt there. And again, reverse. Reverse just makes it a little bit more mellow of a color. And of course, these have no paint filling at all. So paint filling greatly augments the aesthetics and the visuals of what you're looking at. This here is the smoky gray and reverse. So you see on this one here, there's a big difference. It's a lot more subtle. This is red. This one here is the clear, which is the most popular one on the website. This one here is the orange or amber, whatever you want to call it. And again, the reverse. And the green, the focus working, and the reverse. So again, you can see it's clearly legible even when it's reversed. It's just not as in your face, so to speak, as any other color. So here's the yellow. So when we do paint filling on these, you have basically unlimited options. So if you want, let's say, a green with a white or green with a blue or whatever you want, we can do that here for you in the shop. Now obviously this is spread out tremendously. It'd be great if it actually worked this fast, but there's no bit that can handle this kind of speed, although probably my machine can go actually this fast. So what you're looking here is I'm flattening both sides of the red oak after I laminated and glued it. The reason for that is quite simple. You have glue seeping from the top and the bottom, and you need something totally dead flat and parallel to make these custom banks with. What happens if they're not parallel, you end up with a lot of production problems, because basically while you're routing through it, you can actually move on you. And that means some of the inner walls and the outer walls are going to be off. Some of the thicknesses when you put the acrylic on the actual bank will be off. Just everything would just be off. It would just be a mess. Now it might be a little, fraction of an inch here, fraction of a millimeter there, but it's still off enough for me to notice. And if I notice, then eventually somebody else will notice as well. I've made a ton of banks, and I've figured out what looks good and what doesn't, and what works and what doesn't. And that's what I've been optimizing for the last couple of months for. Now in this case here, I have a little spot left empty in the front here, because what I'm doing is looking at how the router is actually handling and the bits are handling the material. I have sheared off a 1/2 inch bit. I did that just yesterday making banks. It's amazing. The machine doesn't care if it's a 1/2 inch or 1 inch. It'll just break it right off. And you're talking about a 1/2 inch of metal, and it just shears it right off. It's mind blowing how strong these machines are. And it shears it right with the red oak, which is incredibly hard. So throughout the whole process of production, I just have to be careful. I have to listen to, make sure everything's done properly. I don't have any burn marks, scorch marks, stuff that needs sanding, all that kind of stuff. So these are all shapes that I came up with just because, I like the variety, I like these kind of things. So Simon, my son, really likes helicopters. So I definitely wanted to make a big helicopter one. So you can see here. And just to show you, this is actually the blue that I just showed you. So you can see here the blue. Again, the lighting here in the shop is meant to be a shop, not a production studio. So you can see how much of a difference, like just the shadows in the bank, actually affect the color. And this is, of course, with tung oil finish. The next one is a yellow submarine, because you wouldn't have a submarine any other color. Just getting a little bit of dust off of this. So yellow submarine. So again, it's a decent size. These are all 8 inches tall. So it gives you an idea as to the length. Again, tung oil finish. Next one is a tractor. My son just loves tractors. So that's definitely some shape I wanted to make for him as well. And again, the slot is always in the top here for the coins. A common question I get is, how do you get the coins out? Well, you can see the screws in the front here. You just unscrew that and you have all your coins back. Or you could send them back to me when the bank is completely full. I'll empty it out and I'll give you a fresh bank that's empty. Here is the elephant. I like elephants. So far these have all been the black oxide screws. I kind of like those ones a lot. I also want to get into shapes that are something not just for kids, because banks are for everybody. So we got one heart here if you wanted 2 hearts, if you wanted a heart between a submarine, or whatever you can imagine. That's what I really enjoy making for customers. Here's an F-22. So the one thing you got to keep in mind with banks is you always need a flat area. So I always have to modify the design a little bit so that it can stay straight. Now this one is a little bit more challenging because you have such a peak up here. So the thing I thought about right away is let's just have the banks come in on both sides. So most of the banks that I make here have the slots on the top, but design-wise like this, it doesn't really work any other way. So you have the slots here at the intakes. So it kind of works out that way. Of course, these don't have the tung oil finish. Just show you the difference real quickly. So this is with tung oil finish, this is without. So you can see there's quite a bit of a difference in the shade. So this is the first piggy bank I've ever made in the shop. It actually came out really nice. I'm very impressed with this one. And you have the slot on the top for the coins, black oxide screws. Again, no tung oil finish at all in that one. Then of course, wine bottle. So using the same sort of design cues as the F-22 that I showed you. It has a narrow top, And I didn't want to have the bank this way, where you put in the coins, although I could easily modify it to be like that if that's what you wanted. I kind of liked it staying straight. So what you do is you fill up this bank, and once it's full, you go to the wine store and you trade it in. Now in the video just now, you saw me hold down the piece of wood around the end of it. And what was happening is that there was so much removed through the top of this, is that it actually wants to fold. Now I have a vacuum system going, I have screws holding it down, but it's still incredibly strong wood and hardwood, and it really wants to fold upwards. Now that's the first time I have something want to fold that much that I actually have to intervene and hold it down while the machine does its work. It's definitely not something you want to do in a shop, but it's either that or produce a lot of waste, and it wasn't really, you know, I know I've been around CNC routers for what, almost 20 years now, so I know what I'm doing, and I know what I see, and I know how to handle the machine, but it's definitely not something you ever want to be doing. So after all the banks are done, I cut them out with a jigsaw, which is the pain point now that I want to solve later on, and then I have to use a manual router to cut out all the ledges all the way around. If I cut the banks completely out, they'll go flying across the shop in no time at all. There's just so much power in the CNC router while it's doing this stuff, pushing and pulling through the material. There's nothing that can stop it, and this is the safest way to do that. So I'm always modifying things on the website to make things easier to order, easier to customize. If there's any options that you would like that you don't see there, just contact me and we'll figure it out. For the shapes and that kind of stuff, again, same idea. You have a rough idea of pricing by seeing what these ones cost on the website. And if you want something different, so, because again, I make everything here in the shop. I make the laminated red oak, all the way through the cutting to the finishing, everything is done here. And as a result, so if you wanted this thing here to be, you know, 3 sets of them stuck together, and you wanted this to be, you know, 6 feet tall, I could totally make that for you. It's not a problem. So just so you know, the biggest limitation we have here with custom fabrication is generally the customer's budget. You know, whatever cost this would be on the website, which I'll post a little bit at a later date, if you want it a lot bigger, it's going to cost a lot more. And it's roughly proportional. So let's say you wanted this 6 feet tall. Right now it's 8 inches tall. Actually, no, this is 12. So it'd be 6 times more expensive tall-wise. But you also have to remember that it's proportional. If you just extend this 6 feet, so times 6, so the price times 6, okay, that's a lot more money. But then it's going to look like a weird wine bottle. So what you really want is 6 times this way and 6 times this way, so everything's proportional. So now you have a 6 times 6 to the price. So just something to keep in mind. If you have some sketches or some ideas of something that you want, send it over. There's no harm in figuring out what we can do for you in the shop. We can also help you with fundraisers. So if you have a big event coming up and you want to have custom sort of things to give out to people for corporate use, fundraisers, what have you, we can help you out with that as well. Now the next step is making the front parts. Now this is acrylic, and that's another sort of pain point I've been sorting out as well for all of these banks. It's been quite a journey, as I mentioned before, because it's not just the red oak. You got to find good suppliers who have good wood. It's not all rotten. It's kiln dried, which is very important. But you also have to do the same sort of steps involved with the acrylic and other materials that go on the front of it. And the reason for that is because you could have a lot of production problems using a laser with acrylic, because acrylic is basically gas, and you're using basically a high power, not fire, but you're using photons to cut through it. That produces a lot of smoke and fire, and you want to have something that's safe to do in the shop in mass production wise. You also want something that can engrave very, very well. So the requirements for this here is I needed something that was clear, that you could see through it most of the time. And again, depends on the angle of the bank, but you can clearly laser engrave it correctly. And it cuts very well. You have a nice flame polish on it as well, which is why I don't use a CNC router to cut this out, although I could. And what you see here is I already did all the holes. This is for the screws. So the router makes the screw holes, and then the screw holes match what the laser is cutting out. So it just makes assembly so much easier for the finished banks. What I really enjoy about the process of CNCKing.com is I've essentially started a business from nothing. Yes, I already had the shop and I already had some equipment, But the headaches and all the work involved with getting these banks up and running has been tremendous. I didn't account for any of it when I started the business. I just want to make some really cool banks for people and kids and all that kind of stuff. Something that's really memorable. And it's taken me on a huge journey that's literally taken me about 7 months of testing new equipment like this. This thing wasn't cheap. And it's an amazing machine to have, and there's always upgrades to be done to make things more efficient, produce better product, and so forth in larger quantities. But the nice thing I like about this business is that I do everything from scratch. So, I'm involved with every aspect of it all the way to the shipping. It's just me here in the shop with a whole bunch of different machines. The router is, the machine that cuts all of these shapes out is the router. Then it goes to the laser, then it goes to power tools, hand tools, all that kind of stuff. So it's really a labor of love that I enjoy doing because it's all woodworking. It's really fun doing woodworking. So if you're looking for custom banks, head over to sandboxranch.com. These products will be on the website, and there'll be a whole bunch more. Anything you have questions about, just send off an email from the website and we'll go from there.